Hi there. Um, Welcome, Darren. Thank you for joining us on short notice to do a quick Q&A about your film,
Thank
For
you.
Mother.
Thanks so much.
Um, so thank you for stepping in for your brother who's supposed to be with us. I'm sorry he's not feeling well, but we wish him all the best.
Thank you.
Um, but speaking of your brother, this film was written by you and your brother together, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so could you talk a little bit about, how much of the story was based on your lives and how much of the themes of this film were elevated by that familial connection?
A lot. A lot of it is autobiographical. I mean, the sort of foundation of it comes from a beautiful Italian film called Mid August Lunch, Pranzo di Ferragosto, by a filmmaker called Gianni Di Gregorio. Gorgeous Italian film from maybe 2006, 2007. And so we had been given a DVD by someone that we didn't know who just had seen our first film and went, "Oh, would you be interested in adapting this?" And at the time, we were both caring for our mum was unwell, and we were sort of back home, spending time back home with her, and sort of living a version of this, this film that we'd been given. And so once we watched it, we sort of fell in love with the idea, and then we thought it might be interesting for us to be able to kind of fuse that original, the sort of foundation of that original film with the experiences that we were having in that moment. And then sadly, we lost our mum maybe a year after that, and then we had other
Sorry.
commitments. Thank you. We had other commitments script-wise at that point, but we couldn't really focus on anything else because we were still processing grief and all that kind of thing. So, by way of sort of managing that or dealing with that or exercising it, we started to write about her, and we started to adapt that the original film, and Four Mothers came from that. Yeah. So I guess to answer the question, yeah, it's a lot of it came from the familial, and a lot came from us being brothers as well, in the sense that like what we discovered when we started to write was that we both had different different experiences with certain memories, and we had different experiences with our mum and different and so all of that became sort of grist for the mill and something that was really kind of therapeutic to explore and to write about.
Yeah. I mean, we don't see very many films about elder care, especially comedies. So could you talk a little bit about the role of comedy? I know your previous film that we showed, A Date for Mad Mary, was also very funny. So it seems like you and your brother have a history of writing comedy together. So how did you tell us about the role of comedy in this story?
It's I guess for us, comedy is just a great way into character. We were big believers in bringing an audience into something through humor, and then sort of peeling layers back, sort of peeling the layers of an onion back, and sort of getting to something maybe more dramatic and sort of something with the characters that's more internal and more hidden and stuff like that. But in the first instance, we always think that comedy is a great way to be able to tell the truth and to be able to look at something that might be delicate, or that an audience might be resistant to. And I think particularly with elder care and the idea of what it means to be a carer, and the idea of our mortality and our parents' mortality and stuff like that. It's a difficult pitch in terms of bringing people into that. So if the you know if the story is inherently a comedy, first and foremost, it becomes a much more propositional sort of sell and stuff like that. And also for us in having gone through the experience that we went through with our mum and stuff like that, there's something very real and truthful about the way in which, when you're faced with issues around mortality and sickness and stuff like that, you find the absurdity everywhere, all around you. You're looking for comedy constantly to try and diffuse the tension of, the grief or whatever it is that you're going through. So using comedy as a way into the story felt appropriate, and it's also what we gravitate towards as film lovers ourselves. We're big comedy fans.
Yeah. But you also hit on a lot of really serious themes throughout the film. The theme of mental health and isolation, it seemed like, and feeling, panic and all that, all those things wrapped up into this beautiful package. Um, but can you talk about, what you wanted to say about mental health in this story?
I don't like the funny thing, I guess, with us is that we don't tend to sit down to write, with a sort of a thesis or an objective around what it is that we want to say. We never really know what it is that we're saying until very late in the process. In fact, usually until we're, doing interviews or chatting about the film afterwards. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess that's what we were talking about. But like, so it's never really designed that way. Really, we kind of start with an idea for a character or a bunch of characters, and then the characters will start to talk to one another at a certain point, and then we just kind of follow that and see where it goes, and then try to find a shape or a structure for it at a certain point.
Yeah.
um, and then very late in the thing, the idea of what it is that we're trying to say will come to the surface. In saying all of that, we at a certain point we did, um, the idea of communication became important to the film. The idea of what it means to be seen by another person became really, really important and fundamental in terms of what the story was. Um, and sort of visibility for people who were older and sort of, feeling like nobody recognizes what's going on with them, and then visibility also for carers and for people who are in that sort of situation with a parent or an older person. And I think there's a very particular way that, um, I think when you're a carer, it's suddenly you sort of see a world. You're doing hospital visits regularly and stuff like that, and you start to see the world in a different way, and you start to see other people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. So I've got a dog here poking me, and so at that point, it's really like this sort of other world that you've never really been aware of, that you're suddenly tuned into.
Yeah.
That when you haven't been a carer, you haven't sort of experienced from that closely, that you're not on that same frequency and stuff like that. So we wanted to explore that, albeit in a comedic setting and stuff like that, but we wanted to tune into that frequency and sort of bring people's awareness to that.
Yeah, so some of it was probably me reading into it a little bit too much, and and I was
No, I
I
mean,
was going down the road of
no, I think
COVID.
you're definitely right. I mean, there's like the elements around panic attacks and stuff like that are very familiar to just both me and Colin. And there was a period when we were promoting our first film, A Day for My Mary, came out at the same time that my mum got quite unwell, and so we weren't really adept at doing press and stuff at that time. And often we would be having sort of interviews like this while at the same time chaos was going on, and you were trying to sort of take care of our mum and stuff like that. And so the craziness of those situations, and the panic and the anxiety that we were feeling in the midst of that, was something that we wanted to be able to sort of bring into this and look at it through a comic lens. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit and switch over to casting. Um, so I mean, just amazing performances by
Thank
by
you.
everyone. So can you talk about, and you said some of it was autobiographical, so clearly casting for the lead role must have been an interesting challenge for you. Can you
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah. So Fanula was a very hard. Finding Fanula Flanagan, who's just amazing and wonderful in the film, and fantastic to work with. That was the sort of biggest obstacle, and we kind of maybe foolishly at the beginning thought that the casting, the ladies, would be easier than it was, and we sort of quickly realized when we started sending the script out that. A lot of older actors will say to you that a lot of people really love the script, love the roles, but they were reluctant to sort of come on board because they felt that if they took on a role of an older person with limited capacity, that they would suddenly start to only get offered those roles then in the future. So
that?
that was something unexpected for us. But then when we finally came upon Fanula, and we were both big fans of her work before, and We
And
actually
Finola
actually
played his mother, right? Yep.
Yes, that's right. She played Edward's mother, and we shared an agent. We'd never met, but we'd known obviously her work and stuff like that, and we met with her, and immediately we sort of knew that this is going to work, and she was really excited about it. And Fanula's also one of those just great actors who's really sort of unself-conscious and wants to be challenged and wants to be sort of thrown into the deep end with something. And so it was a great experience. And she, like, the iPad, I think, drove her crazy. Like, the not being able to in a being part of a movie that was very dialogue driven in a lot of ways was very frustrating for her, because she was constantly just pushing buttons on this device and stuff like that, and she never gets to speak in the whole film, which I think frustrated her, throughout the shoot and stuff like that, in a great way that lent itself then to the sort of tension that we were trying to capture on screen. So I think um, it was quite a difficult shoot for her in that regard, but she really enjoyed it, and she really just came out, gave us an incredible performance, a really, really layered and subtle
Yeah.
performance. Yeah.
So what about Edward's role, James McArdle? How about? I mean, he was just amazing. Just when he first read that positive review of his book, and he started tearing up,
Yeah.
and when he was on the bus, and his mother just embarrassed him so much. I mean, you
Mhm.
could really see his emotions.
Yeah, he was
So
great. He was. We James came on quite early, I think, or we Jack, our producer, had seen Angels in America and seen James in Angels in America, and he had suggested him to Colin and I. And Colin then remembered James. He had also seen Angels in America and loved him. And then I went sort of on this deep dive where I watched a bunch of things that he was in, and I seen this one movie by Michael Winterbottom. It was a movie about Wolf Alice on tour. I think it was called on the Tour or something like that, or on the road. And it was he was playing a sort of a fictitious character in this music documentary. He was playing a roadie, and it was this very, very subtle. He had a handful of scenes in it, but it was a really sort of quiet kind of performance. And sort of seeing that, and then seeing what he'd done with Angels in America, you knew that he was able to do something that was sort of grandiose and theatrical, but also that he had that great capacity to be able to sort of draw an audience in and be very, very quiet, and that he was able to let the camera sort of find the subtleties in what he was doing and stuff. And so he was perfect, and he was great again, just a treat to work with him. And Fanula, had a great rapport and got on really well. So yeah, we looked out.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I really loved the kind of subtle relationship between him and Raph as well.
Yeah.
And I wonder if is there a world in which someday the two of them, come back together after a breakup.
I know. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? It's funny. We were talking with the producer last week, and the producer he was like, "Would you do like a TV spin-off of this?" And we were like, "What do you mean?" And then he was sort of going, "Oh, it'd be really kind of fun to do like a murder mystery with the five of them." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that would be kind of fun actually." So I don't know. We were sort of kicking it around for about half an hour and kind of going, "That could be kind of interesting." So I don't know. Maybe Raph will come back and join the adventure if we start to write that TV series as a follow up. But you never
Yeah,
know.
we're interested.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're fun characters. So I could definitely imagine us sort of spending more time writing them and stuff like that.
And it may be very popular in Europe, but Mas Palomas, Gran Canaria, I think it's a newer hotspot for the U.S. So I think, um, have you been there? Have you been there before?
I've been there to shoot. The only way that we couldn't. So when we did the main when we did the film, the main unit stuff, that was almost a year before we were able to go to Maspalomas Pride, because I think the festival is maybe on twice a year, and so the first time that it was on, we were in the middle of the actual shoot and we couldn't go over, and then we had to wait until the very end of that year to go over with it, because we sort of started editing and stuff. So it was a really sort of, and we didn't really have a lot of money, so we couldn't. It's not like we could go over there with a film crew. So it was essentially Colin and I, with our iPhones, and the two guys, Gordon and Garochi, play Cullen and Billy. So we went over there for 3 days, and it was wild. It was so much fun. We met, sent a call out to a group of Irish guys who were going over to the festival anyway, and asked them would they kind of help out and be in shots with us and stuff like that, and they agreed to it. And so it was, yeah, it was really, really, really good fun, and yeah, just we were able to capture loads of stuff and ended up meeting loads of cool people. And yeah, it's a great spot.
Were there any scenes that made it into the film that weren't scripted?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I don't think so. Strangely, was there anything? I mean, there's certainly bits and pieces that we did. There was little things that I came back to after the shoot and would sort of run out with a cameraman and try and get a, pick up something and shot. And it's one particular shot of a lady in the rest home that we did, like, I think a year and a half after we'd finished shooting while we were and finished editing. Actually, I think it was something that I dropped in very, very late. But pretty much everything, is scripted. We tend to try to we script everything quite heavily and then shoot it a lot. Shoot it like we'll do a lot of takes with the actors, so that it will end up becoming sort of very raw and very real. Because usually at the start, when you shoot for the first, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the actors will come prepared, and it can feel a little performative and stuff like that. And so sometimes the more that you shoot into it, the more that performative energy sort of dissipates, and you get to something that's a lot more naturalistic and a lot more almost documentary like you're sort of just observing it and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So we try to make the films feel spontaneous and improvisational, but they are actually sort of scripted sort of heavily. Now that being said, there are certainly moments where actors will do things, and it's great, and you capture bits and pieces and stuff like that. But for the most part,
okay,
a lot of it is written. A lot of it is actually written. Yeah.
yeah. Last question: what was your favorite scene that kind of turned out beyond your expectations?
Oh wow, what was my favorite scene that turned out? I don't know, man. Like they all are punishing to, you know what I mean. There are scenes and sequences that were fun to shoot, and then a much easier question is what one was it? Like I remember the painful ones. I remember the karaoke scene, which that was like such a small little moment, but we had difficulty on the day with location, and you know we had to get outside to get we had a wet down, and we had like a rain machine and stuff that we had to get out at a certain point, and we didn't get finished with that, and I needed to get back, and I didn't get enough stuff. So the days like that, those are the ones that kind of haunt me. The fun days, it was good fun working with Neve Cusack on the day she was on set to do the 2 days she was on set to do the fortune teller scene. That
Yeah,
was that was fun. It was quite stressful as well. Like every day on it was, we had we did it at the end of COVID, which was probably the worst time to shoot anything, because we shot at a time where everyone was done with COVID, but COVID wasn't quite done with us, and so it was still around, and people were still getting it, and the rules were really very strict on movie sets at that time. Like if someone got it, they had to be lifted off the set, and you couldn't bring them back on. Everybody had to be tested, and so and James got COVID and was gone for a week, and he was in every single scene of the film. So we ended up having to shoot um, the other side of various scenes without him in it, and then come back later just to try to keep up with the schedule and stuff.
yeah,
And then he had a lot of the crew had a hard out, so there was a point at which they had to leave. So by the day that we got to shoot the fortune teller with Neve Cusack and stuff, a lot of our crew had moved on, and there was no crew available at that time. So we had a lot of people who were essentially sort of students that were just starting out and stuff that arrived on set, and we were kind of going, "This is crazy." We had a 12-page scene to get through with a lot of coverage, and so that was fun but crazy. And then in terms of my set, like just little moments and different little things, rather than and it's seen in its entirety. There are moments that all of the actors do that I just love. There's a moment where Fanula is telling James when Alma's telling Edward to go with Jean into her appointment with the physio, and she just sort of shoos him on at the end of it. And there's something I just love the way that she does that. It's like this tiny little gesture.
Yeah.
Like those little small things that every time those are the things that every time I watch the film that I get a lot of pleasure from, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
A
a
lot of,
roundabout way of answering it. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Well, I want to thank you so much for spending the time with us. And I think it's time to get these guys off to the party. So
Enjoy the
really
party.
appreciate
Thank you, Shane. And just to say to folks as well, thank you so much for coming. And please do, with small indie films, we sort of live or die on word of mouth. So please, if you're, whatever your social media jam is, let people know about it if you enjoyed the movie, because it really does help us on our journey. Thanks so much. Thanks,
We
Shane.
will. Thank you.
Thank you.